Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I am Joe Devine, and I'm now joined by Alex Stewart.
Morning, Joe.
Morning, Alex, and Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hello, Joe.
Guten Morgen, Seb. I get nothing from you. Anyway, today we've got a special episode. Some might call it lazy. It's a Q&A episode where we answer your questions. A, because we don't like international football that much outside of a tournament. And B, because we haven't got any ideas. So thanks to you for giving us your ideas and for allowing us to essentially do very little preparation work for something which is supposed to be of extremely high quality. Anyway, some of the questions that we discuss in today's podcast, things about the French League. What about Beneliga? You'll understand what that means soon if you don't already. What team needs just one more step to be the great team? Something about a Manchester United central defensive midfielder, celestial horses, overrated players, Aguero and Shearer. There are so many. There are so many things that we discuss, and it was a fun time, wasn't it, Seb?
It was okay. Yeah, it was okay. Yeah.
I can hear you anxiously tapping the table after you say that.
No, the table's it's a little bit unsteady, but I wasn't tapping the table.
Well, it's not doing it now. Let me try that again. Wasn't it fun, Alex?
Yeah, it was great fun.
There he goes.
Seb will tell you how much fun it was if you ask him nicely.
Hello, Seb. Was it nice?
It was fine. It was okay. Yeah.
Blood from a stone.
And for now, we will leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace of Seb Stafford-Bloor and Alex Stewart. Question number one, and this is from a person whose name I will not repeat because it's a trick name where they make you say it out loud and then, it's a bad name. Why are France producing so many great footballers, but the French league, Liga, is so much weaker? That's a good place to start. Who wants this one, Alex?
Yeah, so I think in some ways, actually, these two things are kind of related to one another. Part of the reason that France has spent such a lot of time and effort on producing young players is that actually many Ligue 1 clubs and definitely lots of Ligue 2 clubs are sustainable only on the basis that they sell players. So there's been a proper effort there to make that part of the business model. It kind of goes back to the 70s. The French Football Association established a charter which forced clubs to have fully functioning youth systems. And then after that, people like Gérard Houllier came along with the Clairefontaine Academy, emphasized technicality as well as physicality, started to produce a roadmap for good young players to come through. I think there's also localized factors, so particularly in Paris, but also in places like Lyon, Marseille, you've got a lot of municipal pitches, you've got a high concentration of population. These kind of cage games can happen which develop technical skills, and then those players get hoovered up by the already very good academies in those respective cities. So I think it's partly an emphasis on youth production, but one of the reasons that the league has remained relatively weak is that apart from PSG, there isn't a huge amount of investment in French clubs, and therefore they have to keep selling young players in order to be financially sustainable. So it's a kind of vicious circle for France, but it's a virtuous circle for football in general.
When they play in the cage games, do they ever climb up to the top and suplex people off, or is there anything? I mean, I know that's a cell, isn't it, rather than a cage? But is there any kind of are there metal steel chairs there, or
I suspect
what's the makeup?
That's something that scouts really look out for. Yes, is the ability to shimmy up the side of one and then sort of vault back down and injure somebody.
Yeah, I make that little jesty comment only really because we both know that Seb is an absolutely huge WWE fan. So good luck to you, Seb.
Massive.
Okay, is the French league that much worse though, Seb? Don't know that it is anymore, is it?
Worse is a really tricky term because it kind of ignores the fact that actually there is a lot of quality in the French league, but it just happens to be at a different stage of development.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about this question is that it's two halves answer each other in the sense that French production lines have always been strong, but if you look at the type of players that they've produced, they've always been desirable. So there's a great emphasis on attacking players. There will always be a market for that kind of player. So, for instance, you don't tend to look for stodgy, no-nonsense holding midfielders in France, do you? There's a kind of elegance and a technique and a flair.
Where do you look for those? Where do they come from?
I don't know. Anywhere where sort of players are sort of shaven-headed and bearded. I'm kind of still wedded to my old prejudices about like what I want from a holding midfielder. I want size and I want, beards and shaven heads. Nonsense.
By the way, speaking of this, I don't know if either of you saw, but Football Daily released a sort of little short social clip the other day on Twitter where one of their presenters spoke to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And
this is a terrible clip.
Have you seen it?
I have.
It's the clip where basically at the end, like the presenter is interested in asking Solskjaer about scouting and about interesting scouting stories.
I actually once went to see a player, and as he walked out of the dressing room or through the tunnel onto the pitch, he had a Mohican. This was when I was back in Norway, and I just said to my scout that let's go home. Not interested. Honest,
not for you.
That was a very short scouting trip.
It feels like that's Solskjaer's Alex Ferguson routine occurring again because you can. In fact, Ferguson used to say things like this. So when he signed Karol Poborski after Euro '96, based on that wonderful goal against Portugal, he wrote in his book, "Ooh, I'll have to do something about that hair," which is really a really weird thing to say about a player that you signed. But it also feels like something that in 1996 was probably 10 or 20 years out of date. And this is Solskjaer kind of, what would Ferguson say in this situation?
I'd be interested to know as well what brought Solskjaer to watch that particular player, because there's a good chance if it wasn't solely based in data that player was kind of unfairly privileged in scouting reports because his hair made him stand out, and therefore scouts paid more attention to him.
I think it's just like it's a touchy topic of conversation for understandable reasons. I mean, I think there's two ways of looking at it. One is that maybe somebody's hairstyle can tell you something about them. If it's a particularly sort of, if it's a kind of a big hairstyle, i.e., not big in terms of size, but big in terms of personality, maybe that tells you that person is a confident person, right? You might be able to take that from someone who has a Mohican. Maybe they're a confident person. But I think the problem is so much of these conversations, or in reality, these verbal digs, come from pundits and observers of the game, and they often refer to black people. And it's generally speaking, it's a slightly different scenario, isn't it? Like I didn't really think about this before the last couple of years, but my partner is a teacher, and she told me once that years ago, when she was quite inexperienced teacher, she teaches in London. To a group of kids, it's a very big mixed culture, lots of people from different backgrounds. That she failed to notify the parents until the day before that school photos were going to take place, and she was surprised by the comeback because she hadn't thought about it either. It's just like ignorance, right? But the mothers of the black children, particularly the black girls, were furious with her because it takes a really long time to sort the hair in the way that they would want to for a photograph, or at least the way that those mothers are choosing to, or perhaps more broadly in a way that British society deems to be socially happy with. Do you know what I mean? Which is a whole another kettle of fish. But I think this is the problem. Like, it's two different sorts of conversations. One, which is a fairly innocent and understandable one, which is that somebody's haircut can tell you something about them, right? I don't disagree with that. I think it would be mad to say that it can't. However, the idea that you're able to interpret what that is a bit stupid, and also maybe you're completely off the mark, or maybe it's the veneer of confidence when actually it doesn't suggest that. Whatever, it's not a good thing to use as a measuring stick. But also, it's often applied to black players, and I just feel that that context is entirely different and probably misunderstood by some of the people who are talking about it, which is why it feels like such a a difficult area, and one that is potentially reasonably going to upset people.
Do you find it quite a strange thing for Solskjaer himself to say? Because if you think about the players that he played with, I mean, nobody did more stupid things with his hair than David Beckham did. Look at sort of Cristiano Ronaldo's haircut when he signed for Manchester United as a teenager. Diego Forlan. David De Gea's messed about with his hair. He's had it in a Mohican at different points of his career.
I think you're right. I think it's playing a role. And I think if we were to apply the same kind of physical-only prejudice to Solskjaer to understand his behaviour, what I would say is that he looks like a boy, and he's spent his life in a world of, like, air quotes, what he might consider to be men. And sometimes maybe he feels that he needs to say things that make him seem more like a man. You know, of course, that's based on absolutely nothing and is not true and is purposefully, humorously conjecture. So please don't take me seriously. But you take the point.
Yeah, no, I'm very accepting of the point.
Good. Okay, well, I'm glad we're all agreeing. Next question is from Sven Janssen. Thank you to Sven Janssen for this one. I like this one. Do you think Beneliga, the Belgian and Netherlands combined league, would make the teams in there more likely to catch up to the top European leagues? A question. Thank you, Sven Janssen, for that. Alex, what are your thoughts?
I think a lot of it would depend on the broadcasting rights that would be achieved by that putative league. Obviously, broadcasting revenue can account for a huge proportion of what a club makes. And currently, the Eredivisie and the Jupiler League are not going to be getting huge amounts of money because they're not necessarily particularly attractive products outside of those home nations. If you bolt them together and you have some of the, you know, some genuinely good clubs, but also clubs with genuine kind of heritage in the European game, particularly obviously Ajax, PSV, Feyenoord, but also people like Anderlecht, that does then become a much more attractive proposition for broadcasters, and that amount of money could make a significant difference. You've also got potentially a more competitive league. I mean, the second division in Holland, largely, well, I think there's 4 or 5 B teams in that league from teams in the top tier. So the talent is kind of quite stretched across those leagues. Whereas if you condensed the best clubs from one league and the best clubs from the other and put them in the same one, again, it's more competitive, it's more exciting. So yes, I think it would be very positive for them. Would it be more likely to catch up to the European top league? I think that's hard because you've still got a massive gap to bridge. I would say it's probably Portugal that are the league that are closest to being in the top 5 leagues currently. But
lots of great players out there.
Lots of great players. Teams that tend to do well in European competition. Obviously, Porto, particularly this season in the Champions League, but also previously having won it. So I think it would be a legitimate challenger to Portugal. I don't see many other leagues stepping up in quite the same way. I mean, Austria's got some good teams and some good players, but there is quite a fall off between Europe's top 5 leagues and the rest.
Well, how do they work it out at the second level? Do the sort of second divisions still one Belgian, one Dutch?
I assume that there would be like a larger set of second divisions within those, and then promotion would come from winning that national league.
But do you always have to make sure that you balance the number of Belgian and Dutch teams in the top league? That's what confuses me when I think about the mechanics of it. If you had the 3 bottom place teams in that Beneliga, the top league, and they were all Belgian, for example. I
don't know. I mean, there has been conversation around sort of these pan-European things before, like with cup competitions. There was an idea to bring, I think, some of the Scandinavian nations and Scotland together and have a kind of North Sea Cup competition. So these things have been discussed before, and I think the mechanics would be geared towards providing maximum interest in those 2 countries. So it would probably be a 1 in, 1 out from each of those nations to make sure that there is a balance.
In which case, theoretically, a team, the lowest placed Dutch team, could be 11th, hypothetically, and be relegated. Extremely unlikely, but
that could be the case, yes.
I'd watch that though. At least initially, I'd be really
Would you
curious.
though? Like,
I'd certainly watch like the first couple of games.
Yeah, but you'd have a curiosity as to what it would look like, and then would you have a sustained interest? It's kind of why I think that would make no difference whatsoever. Because I don't think it. First of all, I don't think it can really happen, because I think to make a structural change like this, I think it's either in Belgium or Netherlands, where you need to have a very high percentage of clubs in agreement to ratify a change like this. And obviously, it would disadvantage a lot of the teams lower down the table, threaten them with relegation to a second tier, deny them broadcasting revenue, which at the moment they're dependent upon. So it's very difficult logistically to see it happening. Also, it creates, Alex is right, it creates new games that people like us might be interested in watching, but people like us aren't what drives broadcasting payment.
Yeah, but I reckon though, let's say for example you're a slightly lapsed Anderlecht fan, but now you play Ajax twice a year, you're probably more likely to watch it.
You kind of already have this facility, don't you? Because if you're an Anderlecht fan, or if you're a fan of a club used to winning or finishing very high upper division, you have European football. And so yes, Ajax are a massive draw, and probably so are Feyenoord and PSV, like historically, but you're also probably getting fixtures against maybe a Manchester United, maybe an AC Milan.
What about if you support Cercle Bruges?
Yeah, but then you're kind of your proposition is to become an also ran in a team full of clubs who are financially stronger than you are and have, historically a bigger draw.
You're so depressing. You're such a depressing man.
There's a very good article about this on The Athletic, so people hunt that down, because there's a very good arguments made about why this probably doesn't change anything.
Then here's another question for you. I want another question. My question goes like this: how is this any different to a European Super League, just a lot smaller?
Because you're not creating any fixtures that people really want to see in the mass.
No. That's not what I mean. I mean just in spirit. It really is. In spirit, in size. Hear me out. Okay. Some of the what I'm saying is, ethically speaking, we wouldn't consider this to be a bad thing for them to do, right? It kind of makes sense. Why is therefore European Super League a bad thing to do? It's the same thing.
Well, I agree. I think they're both bad things in terms of what they do to the ability of clubs to progress up a pyramid. Yeah, I like regional football. I like it to be contained within a country, because I think that's where
you're a nationalist.
No. We don't use words like that. I just mean that I believe in local geography for football clubs. I believe in
local geography.
I believe in fans being able to travel and watch their team. I don't want Man United against AC Milan happening in a place where Manchester United fans can't travel and go and see it, or vice versa.
I believe in local geography. Let's end it there. I take your point, but
we'll end the podcast. That's it.
That's what you think. Stuff25 asks, Alex and Seb, what were your thoughts on Luxembourg that Joe didn't let you share at the end of Monday's pod? Hey, guess what, Stuff25? F*** you. Eye on it, Triff. Which team do you think needs just one more step to be great?
I mean, okay, the tedious initial point is, what do you mean by great?
Sunderland. No, I didn't mean that's what I meant by great. I just meant that's the next step it needs to take.
Oh, right. What, Sunderland just needs to... What?
Needs to find itself a sugar today,
It's found itself one.
It has a very young one, and he won a cup within 4 days of taking over. He got the EF.
Kyrell Louis-Dreyfus.
Well, I am out of the loop, aren't I?
Jonathan Wilson wrote a quick piece on that, because he's a long-time Sunderland fan, who also, I believe, probably advocates localism in football.
Do you know what? Now, Alex, every time, and this is the same for you, but every time I think about Jonathan Wilson, all I think about is those doors not opening. Disaster.
Yeah.
Every single time.
That was one of the single most depressing stories that I've ever heard.
Yeah. Go back and listen to if I can't really remember the details, and I don't want to do it disjustice, but we had Jonathan Wilson on the podcast a couple of years ago, and he told us this story, and it's all I can think about when I think about Jonathan Wilson. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes. So no, I think if you're looking at the Premier League, say, I think in order to be great, what you mean a period of sustainability and success. So I would say that Manchester City are pretty great already, but are one really good striker away from that. I think Chelsea, I think their step is actually time, also possibly signing a striker. I mean, Timo Werner's miss against North Macedonia yesterday is indicative of a player with just zero confidence, and something needs to happen there. Werner is not a bad player. It may be that he's being used bad. I don't know what it is, because this was a guy who was very, very good for Leipzig, but he just looks to have completely lost it. I also think Manchester United potentially are a very, very good defensive midfielder away from being a genuine challenger again. So, yeah, I mean, it's a more complex question than that, isn't it? Because greatness is, I mean, I suppose greatness, we're talking about things like Guardiola's period at Barcelona, that kind of sustained point of success and building on something. And I just don't know that that's possible in football nowadays. I think there's too much flux, and it's too easy to buy in talent. And
well, Seb, have you got any ideas on that one?
I don't really care. I don't. It's, no, I
What's wrong with you? I thought Alex was the miserable one. What happened to this young, fun guy who was always having fun?
For the question
was what happened to that guy who enjoyed his life? Remember him?
You moved to Germany, Seb. You should be really
Tifo
happy.
work schedule.
No, that's true. Is it because you've moved to Germany?
No. It's just like I don't
Is it
have
something to do with the
enthusiasm
air
for the
over there in Germany?
It's the fault of the question.
Is it because Hassan is miserable about the football results, and that's affected
No, that has
your
not.
mood?
That has not spread through the house yet, because I've had quite a good few days of not watching Spurs. I'm pretty happy, I'll be honest.
Do you think it's terminal, whatever's causing this problem?
No, I think it was something provoked by the question.
Yeah,
you
just feel
stop asking
provoked?
questions of me, and direct your frustration with.
I'll ask a question of myself.
Unit Triff.
This question's from Dr. Radler. What do horses dream of when they're prancing through the celestial sea? Sexier horses, of course. That's you know. Here's a question from
Special lions.
Gaurav Amartya. Sorry, I butchered your name. Why United needs a central defensive midfielder. Oh, it's almost as if you planned this, Alex. United needs a central defensive midfielder more than anything this summer. Do one, please, even if it's a separate video. It's not going to be a separate video, you cheeky Gaurav. Cheeky Gaurav. It could have been. It's actually not a bad idea for a separate video. I'm pretty sure we've made it about 7 times, though, so I don't think we can do that again. But the question, says, why do they need one? I think that's plain to see, but you could describe it if you want. But I'm more interested in why you think it should be Eduardo Camavinga.
Well, for that you will have to wait for a video. No, I helped out Carl Anker, who is one of the Athletics Manchester United writers, do a piece on exactly this. Along with some data stuff provided by Tom Warville and Mark Carey, provide suggestions and data on a number of players that United could use as a defensive midfielder. And we kind of broke it up into different types. So there's more creative types, more destructive types. And the rationale for those players also addresses why United desperately need one. So I would direct you to The Athletic for your answer to that question.
Come on, give us a bit of a tease. A bit more than that. Just one sentence. It'll help them
because it
transition
knits
the ball.
Everything else together, doesn't it? If you want to get the ball forwards, particularly to quite a counter.
If you want to get the ball forwards, that's like a great advert for a football team, isn't it? Very specific to like a manager or a director of football. If you're sitting at home and you're thinking, why can't your team get the ball forwards as much as other teams? Well, if you want to do that, you should try subscribing to The Athletic. Visit theathletic.com/Tifo in order to fulfill
Get the ball forwards.
Get the ball forwards.
Right, call us now on 0800 midfield gov.
Even though he got involved in the joke, he still sounded sad. I don't know what that is, but
That's what made
sound
it
moody
good.
and weird.
He sounded sad. One of the best YouTube comments I've ever seen was on our podcast the other day, and it just said 2 Eeyores and a Tigger, and I thought, you know what, that's actually pretty spot on, isn't it? That's pretty spot on. Anyway, we'll be back after this break, and it's probably a break in order that you can listen to an advert. So, I hope you enjoy it. Or, if you don't like adverts, who the fuck does, right? Then you could visit theathletic.com/Tifo and enjoy this advert. And you can listen to our podcast on the Athletics app ad-free. So there's your option. Or just, whatever's happening now for you, enjoy. Okay, we're back. We've got some more questions from listeners. Thanks for sending these in, listeners. Couldn't bear to talk about the international football again. Hey, Flapjack GT has a question. Which players do you knowingly overrate because you saw them once and they were brilliant? I've got an answer to this question.
Is it Robbie Brady?
It's not Robbie Brady. How dare you? But it's not strictly an answer to this question because this question says saw them once, and I saw them, a number of times. But it kind of works because it's Cameron Jerome, and every time I watched him in a championship game at Carrow Road, I thought, oh, fucking hell, this guy's amazing. This guy's amazing. And then whenever I watched him in a Premier League game at Carrow Road, I thought, oh, right, yeah. I forgot. There's just something about this gap that my expectation is too great of Cameron Jerome. But the quality of that guy in the championship, unbelievable. Seb, what's your answer?
Terry Cook. So Terry Cook was a Manchester United player. He came through the Manchester United youth system. And I didn't even watch him in person. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I saw about 15 seconds of him on Match of the Day, in which he did an outrageous little backheel. And that convinced me for about 5 years that he was going to be great. That he started to slide down the league to like Burnley and pre-wealthy Manchester City didn't seem to dissuade me. But I have, now that he's 44 and retired, I have accepted that Terry Cook probably not going to be an era-defining talent, sadly.
People will probably be now accepting that, or over the last few years, reluctantly so, with Ravel Morrison as well, right? That kind of player.
But I think Ravel Morrison, if you said Ravel Morrison, I think you'd have a point because you couldn't foresee some of the issues which occurred. But Terry Cook was just me focusing on one single bit of play that I'd never seen before, translating it into this decadent career that was gonna roll out ahead of him. Poor Terry Cook. Good
Alex,
player,
you got
but
one?
Not,
I have got one, but I can't remember their name.
Well, that's useful.
Chris Marsden, Alex.
No, you can't overrate Chris Marsden. Chris Marsden was a genius. No, there was a winger at Newcastle a couple of years back.
Gabriel
Rolando
Overton.
Aarons. There you go.
Oh.
I knew it would come to me. And I saw, not in person, I saw Aarons score a genuinely incredible goal on Match of the Day after a performance that included trickery and dribbling. I can't remember who it was against. And I just thought, he's going to be amazing. Really amazing. And
Do you think if we were recording this in 10 years' time, you might say Ibrahim Sangare?
No, because his numbers have been consistently great at PSV this season. Actually.
He went all serious there. The joking stopped.
That's the measure. That's the measure of that kind of rebuttal, isn't it? When someone pauses and then says, actually, at the end of their sentence.
All the humour drained out of his voice.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Is Aguero better than Shearer? No. Because of nostalgia. That's how it works. In 20 years' time, might look back and say he was, but you can't summon the tides of time too soon. You understand what I'm saying? It's not okay. You're not allowed to, bring forth the nostalgia until it is there. We all realise, right, that when we live our lives, we mostly have a rubbish time while it's happening, and then we look back and we go, oh, that was quite fun, wasn't it? Or, oh, that wasn't so bad, even when it was fucking horrible when it was happening, yeah? It's the same. Looking back at Alan Shearer now and thinking, wow, he was an incredible player. And, of course Aguero's not as good as him. In 20 years' time, we'll look back and we'll think, who knows? They were both fantastic. Everything's fine. I was on drugs, So...
Well, I was going to side with Shearer, and I was going to be a bit more definitive about it because maybe a little bit of Shearer, but also a little bit of nostalgia. Sorry, but Also because Shearer's goals were generally scored in teams which were much, much worse.
Yeah.
I accept that sort of for probably 2.5 years, that Blackburn side was excellent, but it was still propped up by Jason Wilcox and Stuart Ripley. It still had Tim Sherwood in central midfield. Sutton was a very good foil for Shearer. Shearer scored, just in the Premier League in 3 consecutive years, just in the league, 31 goals, 34, 31. That's amazing as a return. And Sergio Aguero has never broken 30 goals in a Premier League season.
No.
Which, partly due to he's a bit fragile and he's had injury difficulties and that kind of thing. So that's...
And he's in a team with lots of other players who score goals and they play a different style of football, isn't he? He's not always the focal point, right?
Yeah, but I just think for me, and this is not just me being an old man about it, I think Shearer scored goals in many more different ways. I think also, even today, 20 years later, I think he's still kind of the archetype for the Premier League centre-forward. It's probably why Harry Kane has been so successful. He's the closest thing to Shearer today. And yeah, he was just, he was a menace. He was technically brilliant, could score goals with his head, with both feet, but he was also really physical and nasty to play against. Occasionally loved to elbow centre-half, could mix it up a little bit. I just think he's underrated because I think people look at him as belonging to that different age and are a little bit sneery about what he achieved. 260 Premier League goals. That's amazing.
That's stunning.
Amazing.
And you've modelled your haircut on him ever since?
I involuntarily, yes. I didn't originally.
Or just unconsciously.
Over time, I've had to accept Shearer as a bit of a role model. It's been difficult, but,
Can I say, though, here's a couple of things. One, I believe Aguero would score many goals in a rubbish team. But 2, his legacy is an interesting one, isn't it? Because he plays for Man City. And I don't mean this to disappoint or upset Manchester City fans. I'm not trying to be deliberately provocative. But it does have an impact on the way that people will view him retrospectively. Because he's undoubtedly an incredible player. He's one of the best that the Premier League has ever seen. He had his special moment, which will, of course, go down in history, his Aguero moment. And but beyond that, I mean, that's the one, isn't it? That's the one that people are going to remember him for.
It's a weird thing for strikers, isn't it? Because I think if you wouldn't say the same thing about Kevin De Bruyne, for example. In 10, 20 years' time or whatever, you look back and Kevin De Bruyne is one of the great attacking midfielders, creative midfielders that's played in English football. But because Aguero's a striker and is at the end of all of that stuff, there's almost an assumption that because you've got so much creativity behind, then it's easier. And I think that is quite unfair on strikers. I would also argue that it cuts both ways because yes, Shearer played in a functional Blackburn team, but it was a functional Blackburn team that was geared towards providing him with scoring opportunities.
I was going to say, how many chances per game do you think he was getting when he scored those 30-plus goal league seasons? I
mean, I think the answer is that Shearer is better. That is my opinion as well. But I also think that effectively these sorts of arguments are pointless.
We're going to have it anyway.
Well, no, but because styles are different, physical attributes are different, teams play differently. You just comparing like for like, unless you're basically looking at the same position in the same sort of team over the same sort of season, it just doesn't really mean very much.
With Shearer, though, do you not feel like that Blackburn side was a 4-4-2 and its asset was the 2 wingers, Ripley and Wilcox? But Shearer didn't just score 30 headers a season or 30 cut back crosses from inside the 6-yard box. The range of his influence was amazing. And actually, it broadened out when he was at Newcastle. And if you think about what he lacked, so there was no kind of scheming, playmaking number 10 in that side. There was there's nobody who could play the kind of creative balls that you associate with, for instance, like a Kevin De Bruyne. In many ways, Shearer was his own forward department. Whereas I think Sergio Aguero is brilliant. I mean, he's one of the few players that every time he gets the ball, when he's playing against your team, you're afraid. And that's, there is no greater respect than that. But at the same time, I still see him as a little bit of an extension of his side, as a kind of a final piece in the Manchester City jigsaw. It's interesting. I think Alex is right in the sense that it's a redundant argument because football has changed so much, but it's very difficult at least to elevate anybody above Shearer. I'll put it that way, because of what he achieved and what he achieved with what he had around him. I think that's kind of overlooked a little bit. I
think being the final piece in a jigsaw is a skill in itself, though, which is probably an underrated skill.
No, because it's you're placed into the jigsaw. Like, you're purchased for having a specific set of attributes.
I don't think you are placed in the jigsaw, though. I think
but
there's
that
a
is
degree
literally what
to
City
which...
did with Aguero. He is that player playing that role. He is the predator in that side. Whereas,
but you still need to develop understanding. You still need to get used. I mean, I take your point, and I think we are both agreeing on most of this. I just think that perhaps it's unfair to Aguero generally just to reduce it to that.
I don't think we're reducing him, because I still think we're acknowledging that he is a wonderfully eclectic goal scorer, like one of the best natural finishers I've seen in the league. Definitely. The difference for me is that there is no Blackburn without Alan Shearer. There is no Newcastle, however you rate their quote-unquote achievements during that period when he returned back to the North East.
If you put quote-unquote around them, you obviously don't rate them.
Yeah, I know, it's just a kind of like... You get the kind of sneering, well, what did he win at Newcastle, like thing, but that's kind of beside the point. Whereas I always felt with Aguero, and this is probably a result of City's resources, and probably quite right, it's probably not something to hold against him, but if they don't get Aguero, their future is, their history is a little bit different, but at the same time, they spend a huge amount of money on somebody else who is excellent in a different way, perhaps. Whereas with Shearer, I never had the same vibe. It was a slightly different dynamic of a career, if that makes sense. So it's kind of apples and oranges. So it's a really hard one. But I don't think we're reducing Sergio Aguero. I just think it's I don't know. I've never, it doesn't provoke the same thing for me.
Oh, the good old days, eh?
Back in the days.
There's a guy I see wandering around Winchester where I now live who's wearing a Euro 96 grey England shirt.
Oh, he's getting into the vibe.
Every
he's
time
getting excited.
I see him, I get that kind of like, oh, it's going to happen soon.
Do you reckon that's one he's bought recently, or one he's had since Euro 96?
Does it fit him well, Alex?
He's absolutely not old enough to have bought it to wear a Euro 96.
Oh, right. I was imagining an old man.
No, this is a young buck.
Is that who you're talking about? You're the young buck wandering around Winchester.
I've got a friend who's doing this and
cocking your leg, pissing against the lampposts, letting everyone know.
England shirts, actually.
Do you know what I was thinking of? For me, I always think of the Wigan Arsenal game on Sunday, the 18th of April, 2010, when Wigan won 3-2. Who remembers that game?
I do. That was a goal when Charles Nzogbia scored.
Charles Nzogbia scored.
Good player, Charles Nzogbia.
Also, Bramble, what's his name? Titus Bramble scored in the 89th minute. And Watson, apparently, I can't remember who Watson was. He scored in the 80th minute.
Did Connor Salmon score in that game?
No.
There was a terrible goalkeeping error from, it was either Fabianski or Szczesny. I forget who was keeping goal, but
it was Fabianski. I think that was the Bramble goal.
It kind of goes under him, right?
I think so. Yeah. But the Nzogbia goal is stunning.
Really nice goal.
I was watching that in a pub I worked in Islington, and so there were loads of Arsenal fans in, right? And it just gave me so much joy. Not because I dislike Arsenal, but you understand, if you're not an Arsenal fan and you work in an Arsenal pub, it can be kind of grating at times.
In Islington.
In Islington, sure. like not far from the stadium. And my friend Dean, my colleague and friend Dean at the time, who was a massive Arsenal fan, who wasn't working, but he'd come in to watch the game, and he was sat at the end of the bar. And I just found it so funny. I had to really control myself not to upset some people or get myself in trouble. But one of the great comebacks of all time. Fucking love that game. Anyway, a couple more questions before we finish. This one is from Pramode Nupane. Sorry, I'm probably butchering everyone's names today. Apologies for that. Why are English teams of lower stature so afraid to give chances to young progressive managers despite their success throughout Europe? Because it's not how we do it here. Yeah, because you can keep your clever ideas elsewhere. What I want is a football man in a football tracksuit, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but I want him to do the thing on the pitch with the thing, and I want to say,
football tracksuit.
Get in the football tracksuit. You get in the football tracksuit. That's what I want to say. Get in that football tracksuit.
There was a tweet yesterday, and I'm not going to name the ex-professional footballer who tweeted it, but essentially what it was saying was terms like double pivot, expected goals, low block, transition, beat the press, etc. should get in the bin.
Get in the bin.
And then the responses to this included various other terms that do crop up in Tifo videos. And while it's very easy to poke fun at somebody who's also doing stuff for engagement and kind of acting a bit curmudgeonly, I do think that there probably is still this tendency that terminology, which is probably the easiest way of expressing a lot of those concepts, and B, also has a lineage in other sports. So some of these terms turnover comes from rugby, but also basketball, pressing, blocks, that kind of stuff. These terms aren't necessarily just being created out of nothing, but there is within the English game, I feel like a real reticence to embrace.
Can I tell you why?
Thinking, go on, please.
It's because of some of the people who say them. That's why. It's
I
because
think
it's
that's
very
probably
easy
true.
to
You're
sound
blaming
extremely patronising. Not Alex, but it's very easy to sound extremely patronising. This is a political thing. This happens in politics too, right? Where someone comes up with a term which has a reasonable etymology and isn't an unreasonable thing to call this thing. But then they tell people about it, people who already understand essentially the thing, but they understand it in a slightly different way, or being called something else. And the way in which those things are, assumed to be rather smugly quite so definitive, it can be really patronising. And part of me thinks, go fuck yourself.
No, that's kind of a problem with the people.
And it's a problem with analytics as well.
Yeah, it's a massive problem with analytics, for sure.
This is why expected goals partly is an issue. It's been communicated quite badly in some instances what expected goals actually is, and also, more importantly, what it's useful for.
Yeah,
but also
my goal.
If you spend a lot of time on quote unquote football Twitter, which is in itself an abhorrent concept and phrase, then you see certain people being quite smug about this stuff, or this is less the case now because I think people are more aware of how they present. But if you have a certain type of person, quite a kind of nerdy, introspective, worked really, really hard on something and thinks it's important. He's talking
about himself, Alan.
I'm not.
He's talking about himself. Let it out, Alex. It's okay. Let it out.
Then
a certain type of person, nerdy, introspective. I just don't know anybody like that at all.
I don't know anyone like that, Seb. What? We're
bit moody, bit sulky.
Go on,
Doesn't
Alex,
take
let
much
it out.
joy in much thing.
Go on. Let it go.
This is kind of strangely cathartic. Yeah, I think those people are quite often bad at putting ideas forward in a way that is understandable to a wider group, and also, more importantly, not getting defensive when those ideas are challenged.
Big time.
And when people say, but I don't understand what that means or what its importance is or even why it's called that, then the answer too often, particularly in the last few years, was, well, that's because you don't understand football or you don't see the point of this or whatever. And that is incredibly unhelpful. And yeah, like you say, I think the people that use these terms do the terms more disservice than good sometimes. That was a little bit like
people
a
gonna be
session
people.
For me.
That's the thing. I'm glad it was, Alex. I'm glad it was. People gonna be people. Gonna people gonna, and that's how we all approach the world. Yeah. One more question from Matt London. This one's just to upset Seb, I think. Next Spurs manager, who should it be? In Matt's question, he talked about Nagelsmann, Rodgers, Graham Potter, and Hasenhüttl. And if you'll notice, I only gave Graham Potter a first name and a surname because he not as famous. Seb?
I don't want to mention any names. I just think it'd be nice to have some low-profile coaching. Someone who makes less media noise, who attracts less of a kind of
Scott Parker.
vicious argument. I quite like Scott Parker. No, not Scott Parker yet, because I'm enjoying what he's doing at Fulham and he's still learning.
I like this game though, picking a sort of a person who fades into the background a little bit.
Yeah, someone with ideas, someone who captivates and unifies the fan base. I think that's the most important.
John Terry.
Probably not John Terry, no.
Is it possible to, and this is a straight question, is it possible to captivate and unify a fan base without being a little bit bombastic and out there? Because fans seem to engage with charismatic managers more than they do with quiet, thoughtful ones.
No, I don't. I'm not sure I agree, because I think I suppose we need to create a divide between sort of what interests people on, as you said before, football Twitter, and what interests people that go to the stadium. And I think believing that a team is on a journey to somewhere, even if it's not, winning the Champions League or the Premier League, but just making steady steps forward and, with individual players within it growing and developing, that's very unifying. I don't need a showman. I don't need someone that's going to say provocative things in press conferences, because I don't really care about that. That's soap opera nonsense.
I think you need Graham Potter.
Substance.
Everything
Graham Potter's
you're describing is Graham Potter.
I think if you put someone like that at a club like Spurs, you would get a little bit of snobbery.
Well,
in the same way that you would pretty much at any club, because you'd be like, yeah, but what's he done? And that's kind of the default setting for a lot of fans, I think.
He's the pot man. You get the pot man.
He is indeed the pot man, but you need to be given an opportunity.
Have you just coined a really shit nickname?
Why don't we call him the sub pot? Yeah, because he's what happens after Mourinho, and you're not really sure what's going to happen. It might not be in the text, but then it breaches the text, and he just becomes the pot.
Yeah, but he'd be happening at the same time, though, wouldn't he? If he was a sub pot.
Yeah, but those are the most clever plots.
He'd be like the sort of the epipod.
Well, it's like you watch a film that you think is about fighting, but it turns out it's about disability.
Yeah, but it's
Didn't
not.
Even know.
It's not two films sequentially, is it, Joe?
No, it happens at the same time. That's what I'm saying.
Right. So therefore, it's not the same as having.
Well, the subplot can be concerned with the plot.
Yeah, but
I feel like we need a 4-day weekend.
Anyway, that's probably the end, I think, for Tifo podcast. We've picked Graham Potter there, so that's great. Well done to Graham Potter. Congratulations on your new job. Well done to Seb. I hope, Seb, that you start to, feel a little bit better. Maybe watch a heartwarming film. I could suggest The Lion King, or
it's 2 weeks of international football does to you, Joe. It kind of chisels away at your enthusiasm gradually.
Hey.
But club football this weekend, I'll be happier by the time we record again. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Well, fantastic. And Alex, you'll soon have to no longer pull the weight of attempting to be slightly more upbeat in Seb's absence, and you can go back to being a miserable bastard.
I'm so relieved.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting for everyone. We'll be back to normal rotation next week. Game relevant, of course, and the stats and facts database. Stats? Was it that? The facts and...
It's facts and stats.
Facts
and quotes.
Facts and quotes.
It's your fucking database.
Technically, I thought it was quotes and facts.
The facts and quotes and facts database will return as of next week's podcast. And what else have I got to tell you? Oh. For anyone that's made it to the end of the podcast, we've got some very exciting Euro 2020 plans, and plans that are going to happen in 2021, much like the European Championships are, even though they're called the Euros 2020. I will appraise you all of these more closer to the time, but I want to let you know we're going to be doing some hot stuff. Yeah, we're going to be riding a wave of creativity and satisfaction, unlike any other previously known to Man or T-Pose. So look forward to that, and you can trust me when I say high quality. Yep. All right. Seb, thanks. Alex, thanks. Producer Adonis, thanks as always. And we will be back on Tuesday. Au revoir.
The Athletic.